Our story begins late at night inside of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Obi-Wan Kenobi is struggling to fall asleep despite the extreme exhaustion from the prior days and really the prior 3 years. After more months fighting droids in the Outer Rim than he cares to remember, Obi-Wan was finally back on Coruscant, and the war was seemingly winding down. Dooku was dead, killed by the man Obi-Wan trained, while Obi-Wan was knocked out. Palpatine was rescued, and the Battle of Coruscant, that certainly left a lot of destruction behind, actually ended up as a victory, despite all odds. The entire plan for Grievous and Dooku still made very little sense to Obi-Wan. Grievous captured Palpatine, and his ship just sat in the middle of the battle until it was trapped, allowing the Jedi to board. Part of Obi-Wan wondered if he and Anakin were a huge part of the plan, but if they were, it obviously must have backfired. All of these thoughts were just flying through Obi-Wan's brain. He really had trouble calming himself for the first time in a while, and so Obi-Wan decided to go somewhere else in the temple. He made his way through the quiet halls, and only a few Jedi were still awake to study or handle other Jedi business, and eventually Obi-Wan got into the temple lift and made his way up until he was inside of the Jedi Council chambers. This area was extremely peaceful, so long as there wasn't an actual meeting going on. War wasn't exactly great for the Jedi, but tonight it was quiet, and Obi-Wan embraced the quiet. He got to his own seat, and he turned it to face the city, and Obi-Wan just closed his eyes, allowing the currents of the Force to flow through him, guide him, bring him peace. But it would not be peace that would be finding Obi-Wan tonight. There were dark currents flowing all around Coruscant, and these dark tendrils of the Force were finding their way into Anakin's mind, finding his worst fears and showing them to him. The influence of the Sith was poisoning the Force, and now Anakin, asleep in his bed with Padme, began to have nightmares of Padme dying. She was calling out for him, begging for him, and her strength was failing her on some strange alien table as she died in childbirth. And as Anakin went through these nightmares, the coils of darkness found something else. One of Anakin's greatest attachments was deep in meditation, and it were as if the tendrils infecting Anakin's mind reflected right to Obi-Wan. And now, as Obi-Wan searched the Force for peace while inside of the council chambers, he instead found the darkness. Obi-Wan began hearing echoes of clone troopers calling out orders, followed by heavy blaster fire, and at first he thought it was just a memory of the war. But Obi-Wan quickly realized this was some sort of vision. He just landed on the Jedi Temple hangar, and he moved inside to see hundreds, if not thousands of 501st clone troopers, Anakin's clone troopers, firing at Jedi as their lightsabers blinked out. And from the other side of the hangar, Obi-Wan looked to see someone with a blue lightsaber cut down a Jedi Master and a Padawan. The man turned, and Obi-Wan locked eyes with him. It was Anakin, and Anakin threw his lightsaber at Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan suddenly woke up, still in the council chambers. He was breathing heavily, sweating, and he realized everything was alright. He was safe. He looked back out of the window, and he realized the sun was coming up. It was morning, so he was clearly asleep for a while before the visions came to him. Obi-Wan was having trouble believing what he just saw, and after a minute of calming down, he left the council chambers and moved around the temple quarters hallway. When he reached Anakin's room, Obi-Wan knocked on the door and he waited, but there was no response. Obi-Wan felt worried, but a moment later, Anakin appeared behind him and he asked what is going on. Obi-Wan turned to see his friend, and he noticed Anakin's eyes were tired and a bit red, as if he too had trouble sleeping. Obi-Wan smiled gently, and he said he just wants to make sure that Anakin was alright. He had a bad dream, that's all. And this actually intrigued Anakin quite a bit, as he too had a terrible dream last night. He was actually on his way to try and visit Master Yoda, who was kind enough to make time to speak with him. But Anakin instead decided he should talk to Obi-Wan. Both of them clearly saw something that made them uncomfortable last night, so Anakin entered his temple room, and he invited Obi-Wan inside after him. Anakin asked what Obi-Wan saw, and Obi-Wan said that he saw the Jedi Temple, and it was under attack. Anakin was shocked by this, asking if Grievous is going to come back with his droid armies. Is Maul going to rally the Mandalorians to attack the temple? Anakin rattled off a couple more theories before Obi-Wan interrupted, and he told Anakin that the temple was under attack by him and his 501st troops. And Anakin froze. Why would he ever do that? He asked Obi-Wan if that truly he believed this was a possibility. Obi-Wan said of course he doesn't, but he knows what he saw. It was unlike almost anything he's ever seen before, and he rarely had visions like this. Anakin was silent, clearly thinking this over, wondering how or why this would be possible. And Obi-Wan asked Anakin what his nightmares were about. Anakin turned to the window, looking outside to avoid eye contact, and he told Obi-Wan they were of death, like the ones about his mother. Anakin knew that Obi-Wan knew about Padme, or at least he knew that the two of them were close. Obi-Wan didn't know that they were married, or that Padme was pregnant, and it was sort of an unspoken agreement that they seemed to have because Obi-Wan knew that Padme made Anakin happy when nothing else ever truly could anymore. So Obi-Wan asked if the nightmares were about Ahsoka, about himself, any Jedi, and when Anakin didn't respond, Obi-Wan said perhaps it's time that they talk about Padme. Anakin felt his anxiety building, and he instinctively said there's nothing to talk about, and he turned to leave. But Obi-Wan said that he knows Anakin loves her, and he's willing to do anything to protect her. Anything. Anakin quickly realized what Obi-Wan was insinuating, and he then turned to quickly face his former master and say he is not some monster. If saving Padme meant killing the Jedi, he obviously couldn't do it. Obi-Wan sighed. Then he told Anakin that there is no better motivation than love. He felt it when Satine died. He felt like he could fight and beat anyone in the galaxy. And Obi-Wan paused for a moment, then said he sometimes still remembers the feeling that he had when Satine died. Anakin was surprised to hear this. The two of them had never really discussed what happened in that throne room when Satine was killed, as Anakin could tell just how painful the entire memory was. But Obi-Wan decided that now was the time to open up and teach Anakin perhaps the most important lesson of them all. If Anakin's visions and his own vision were connected, then Obi-Wan must make sure that Anakin realizes that the dark side is not the way. Obi-Wan told Anakin that the Sith will use Anakin's love against him, and he now recalled the feeling inside of that throne room. Anakin listened as Obi-Wan's eyes glossed over as he spoke. When Maul pulled Satine through the air, stabbed her through the gut, it felt as if the galaxy was going to come crashing down. She fell to the floor, and Obi-Wan held her. And Obi-Wan said that something began to course through his veins. It was not blood. It was something simultaneously colder, and yet hotter than blood. It was anger. He fought to hold it back, and he listened to Satine's final words. She told Obi-Wan to remember that she has always loved him. Her fingers reached up to his face, as she said she always will. Her eyes closed, and her body went limp in his arms, and she was dead. Obi-Wan shook his head, and he told Anakin that when Maul killed Qui-Gon, he was stricken with sorrow, and on this day, sorrow had gripped him again, but there was something more, something dangerous, something that scorched him. Satine was never Maul's enemy. She was only a tool that Maul used to get the throne of Mandalore. She was only a tool used to hurt Obi-Wan. Using a person that way was the worst form of cruelty. Satine was a wonderful person. Her death wasn't just a loss for Kenobi, it was a loss for Mandalore, for the galaxy. All she wanted was peace. Her life was spent fighting for peace. She was a leader that should have lived to see her world thrive and been able to look back at everything she achieved. But in a split second, Maul extinguished this light in the universe and replaced it with shadow. It was truly the definition of the dark side, and Obi-Wan burned with rage. Anakin saw Obi-Wan now clench his fist as he remembered all of it. Anakin said he didn't have to keep going, but Obi-Wan said that this is something Anakin must hear. And he told Anakin that in this moment on Mandalore, he actually had a vision granted to him by the Force, the dark side of the Force, just like the one from last night. As Obi-Wan sat there burning with rage, he suddenly saw himself, eyes smoldering with hatred, screams in the glare of his blue lightsaber as it turned to red. He cleaved Maul in two. He did much worse, until nothing was left of Maul, Savage, Olmec, any of the Mandalorian commandos. He destroyed anyone who contributed to Satine's death, and he would kill anyone who stood in his way by word or by deed. Anyone. And then, the vision ended as Maul laughed, feeling Obi-Wan's descent into darkness, and Obi-Wan saw the truth. If he gives in to these desires, he would be giving Maul exactly what he wanted, and the exact opposite of what Satine would have wanted. Obi-Wan closed his eyes a moment, and then he looked to Anakin as he said that Anakin's situation is extremely similar to this. The mysterious Darth Sidious may very well be in control of the Republic, just like Dooku said. And he told Anakin that it is extremely likely that the Sith are using Anakin's love for Padme as a weapon to turn him against the Jedi and against the light, just as Maul tried doing with Satine. Anakin could see how much that day truly affected Obi-Wan, and he admired how strong Obi-Wan was to remain as a truly great Jedi. He asked how Sidious could even know of him and Padme. So, Obi-Wan let Anakin in on a secret that only Yoda and Windu knew. There were suspicions that Sidious is extremely close to Palpatine, whether Palpatine knows it or not, and Obi-Wan asked Anakin if he's ever talked to Palpatine about Padme. Anakin nodded. He has certainly brought her up, and he realized now that if Sidious is around Palpatine, then the Sith could certainly know of his relationship. Anakin asked what he must do. He can't just let Padme die. And Obi-Wan told Anakin that these visions are not absolute. His vision on Mandalore did not come to pass because he did not give in to the dark side. Anakin must focus on what Padme wants and truly listen to her. The two of them would finally depart the room as they were being called into a briefing for the Outer Rim sieges. Skywalker and Kenobi would attend this briefing, and before long, Anakin would be called into Palpatine's office. And as Palpatine made Anakin his personal representative on the Jedi Council, Anakin was barely listening. He was instead looking for any signs of Darth Sidious. Anakin was realizing that the true threat to him and to Padme was the Sith. All of his attention was basically focused on this, but when Palpatine gave him this role, Anakin was excited to be a council member so he could be involved in further discussions about finding Sidious. And as time went by, Obi-Wan would make it clear to Yoda and to Windu that he intends to stay on Coruscant until the war ends. He was being considered to be the Jedi that would be sent out to destroy Grievous, but Obi-Wan decided after his talk with Anakin that he cannot leave. When Grievous was eventually found, the council would send Kit Fisto and redirected Plo Koon from Cato Nemoidia to join him there as well. A couple more days had gone by, and Anakin had now heard the tragedy of Darth Plagueis from Palpatine himself. In the moment, Anakin was shocked, and he was wondering if there was truly a power to save Padme from dying. But as these initial thoughts faded away, Anakin remembered his talk with Obi-Wan. The Sith will use his love for Padme against him, just like Maul did with Satine. And that would soon lead Anakin to a rather simple conclusion. Either Darth Sidious told Palpatine about Plagueis directly, or Palpatine was Darth Sidious. And Anakin would decide to bring this theory to the two people closest to him, Padme Amidala and Obi-Wan Kenobi. This worked quite well, as Obi-Wan actually wanted to talk to the two of them together. Anakin expressed his thoughts, and Obi-Wan said that this lines up with what Yoda and Windu have begun to suspect. Padme said that this would obviously be treason of the highest level, and she revealed that she is actually part of a secret group of senators putting together a delegation to ensure that Palpatine gives up his emergency powers once the war is over. Padme was told by Bail Organa, Mon Mothma, Chi Ikwe, Fang Zar, and the others not to tell any Jedi about their delegation, as they couldn't be sure where the Jedi stood on this matter. But Padme trusted Skywalker and Kenobi more than she trusted just about anyone else in the galaxy. Padme said that perhaps it is time for the two groups, the Jedi Council and the Delegation of 2000, to meet and discuss what must happen from here. And that is exactly what would happen, as Padme would speak to the members of the delegation, while Anakin and Obi-Wan would speak to Windu and Yoda via hologram from Kashyyyk. Soon, members of the two groups would gather inside of Padme's apartment, as Windu first laid out everything the Jedi know of Darth Sidious. And then, Anakin said that Palpatine knows tales of the Sith, that only someone close to this Sidious would truly know. The senators, Padme, Mon, and Bail, said they are willing to represent the Jedi in the Senate if they choose to act against Palpatine. And that was all Windu needed to hear. He'd been itching to go up against Palpatine for days now, and this was the confirmation he needed. And so, the group came up with a plan to ensure that Palpatine cannot escape. Inside of his office, Chancellor Palpatine was monitoring the situation on Utapau, and he was much more worried about Anakin joining him than he'd expected to be. The last couple of days, Skywalker has seemed to be wary of him, but Palpatine still planned to reveal himself to Skywalker and to promise he could save Padme from dying. And as he considered all of this, his doors suddenly swung open, and in walked Mace Windu, Saesee Tiin, Aegon Kolar, and behind them were three senators, Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and Padme Amidala. Windu and the others ignited their lightsabers, telling Palpatine he's under arrest for treason against the Republic. And Bail said that thousands of senators will be against Palpatine if this goes to trial. Palpatine slowly stood up, and he decided that everyone in this room must die. He will have all of the Jedi killed, and all of the senators who support this will be arrested. He will control everything. Sidious lifted his hands, and he fired lightning at the 6 of them. The 3 Jedi raised their blades to block it, and Windu turned swiftly, pushing everyone out of the room except for him. And then he slammed the doors shut. Sidious ignited his blade, and he told Windu he's been wanting to kill him for a long time, and he will be sure to enjoy this. The 2 of them circled around each other, and Sidious smiled as he told Windu he cannot stop what is to come. Windu's purple blade met Sidious's blood-red saber with a sudden intensity. The 2 masters of the Force suddenly were moving with speed and precision beyond most Jedi or Sith. Each strike from Windu carried the weight of his love for the Republic. Movements were fluid, designed to turn Sidious's dark energy against him. Sidious countered with blistering ferocity, and he sliced through the dimly lit room. The force of their duel shattered furniture, toppled the statues, and left scorch marks along the walls, as sparks from their sabers lit the chamber in bursts of light. Sidious could feel that victory would soon be his. But above the streets of Coruscant, a speeder weaved through the city. Timing their approach perfectly, Anakin steadied the speeder as both he and Kenobi leapt through the glass in a synchronized burst. Shards of glass rained down as Anakin and Obi-Wan landed, sabers igniting in unison. Sidious's momentary surprise gave Windu the opening he needed, his blade pressing Sidious into a defensive stance, and Sidious was driven backwards towards the Jedi duo. The 3 Jedi were quickly working together against the Dark Lord of the Sith. Windu's relentless offense pushed Sidious to his limits, while Obi-Wan's defensive Sorosu style intercepted any attempt Sidious made to turn the tide. Anakin's aggressive strikes forced Sidious to constantly reposition himself. Each move flowed into the next, with Obi-Wan covering for Anakin's bold advances, and Windu exploiting any hesitation from Sidious. Finally, the Sith Lord was cornered, and Windu's blade carved through Sidious's saber. Anakin cut into his thigh. Sidious fell to a knee, then pointed his fingers at them, firing stronger lightning than ever before. All 3 of them deflected the tendrils, and Anakin used his desires to keep Padme safe to power through the lightning and stab Sidious through the heart. And Sidious fell dead to the floor. With the Sith gone, the senators from the delegation of 2000 opposing Palpatine would keep their word. In an emergency Senate meeting, Padme, Mon, Bail, and the others would speak up against the atrocities and the treason from Palpatine, as the Jedi were able to gather proof from his office, his lair, and from Dooku's castle to show that Palpatine did play both sides of this war. Negotiations would quickly take place to end the war, once and for all. Grievous was killed by Plo and Fisto, and with the war over and peace spreading through the galaxy, Anakin would temporarily separate himself from the Order and spend as much time as possible with Padme on Naboo, as she soon would give a safe birth with Obi-Wan close by to help Anakin stay calm. When Padme did survive, it was the best moment of her and Anakin's life, and they would celebrate with Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, who was able to capture and arrest Maul peacefully, and other close friends, as Anakin would soon look to the stars with his 2 children, and he told them that they will someday explore the peaceful galaxy together. And folks, that is where our story ends today. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. As I've said before, I will always enjoy doing stories that are just consisting of Anakin and Obi-Wan kind of working together. It's like a Clone Wars episode, but ultimately, it is important for the state of the entire galaxy. But yeah, I really wanted to pursue that path. I think I've done stuff like this before. It's hard to avoid the 2 characters, Anakin and Obi-Wan, but really just enjoyed this path with Obi-Wan really going in depth on Satine and just his thoughts there. I got the vision part of it. He actually did have that vision. It was from audiobook Stories of the Clone Wars. So yeah, that was inspired by that. Really enjoyed it. It was good stuff. Enjoy listening to that. I'd recommend it for you as well. Anyways, hope you enjoyed today's video. Let me know what you want to see next, of course. And I will see you in the next video.